Hello everybody and welcome to Code Week. Thank you for being here and thank you for inviting me in this special event. I'm Vasilis Poulopoulos. I'm an assistant professor at the University of Peloponnese. I'm a member of the Knowledge and Uncertainty Research Laboratory of the University of Peloponnese and the co-founder of Sporos, which is a non-profit organization that is created in order to perform social actions in the wider region of Kalamata, the region of Messenia. I'm here to talk to you about my research interest, my main research focus, which is big data and culture, which I believe could make an opportunity for a novel niche market. But let's start from the beginning. Let's start from the main term of this sentence, which is nothing more, nothing less than data. Why are we concerned about the word data, about data all around us? Well, data is all around us from the time technology evolved and the electronics and mainly computers entered our lives. Our lives and people having to deal with data are separated into two main categories. These are the digital natives and the digital immigrants. And actually, I'm in a generation that is in between. Digital natives are all these generation after the end of the 80s that were born together with the technology. They are very accustomed to technology, and the younger generations, like Generation Z, are actually part of the technology, cannot imagine their lives without technology. These two generations are pretty much interested in technology and electronics. And it's pretty clear that their lives are guided with the use of technology and especially the internet. And of course, while data were a matter of the businesses until some time, and still are, it is around 2000, this decade, where social media evolved and changed actually what we are in the world of the internet. Actually, we used to be the consumers of all these data, while today we are not only consumers of data, we are also producing large amounts of data. This is a term that was introduced in the past, and everybody is called in this online world a prosumer. But talking about the online world, the World Wide Web, and the social media, we should consider that talking about data, everybody has in his mind and her mind, a very different word. We are talking about big data. So in this online world, in this hybrid world that we live, we are in front of big amounts of data. And what is big amounts of data? Big amounts of data are called big data because of several facts. The first one is the volume of them. They are lots, tons of data produced daily in very high speed. That's the velocity of the data, and having several sources, so they have a very high variety. It's these three V's together with some more V's nowadays that create what we call big data. But what this has to do with how we live? Well, we live in a hybrid world, in a hybrid environment. We live in this mixed environment, the online environment, the offline environment, for several years now. And we're used to live in such an environment, and the restrictions that were made due to COVID-19 proved that we are used to live in such an environment. We didn't have a problem, nothing had actually a problem to leave this mixed world, this restricted world, when everybody had to do his or her job through the internet, and we managed to do it. So this means that we are used to doing our everyday activities, our everyday interactions, socializing and working performed online. So what we think when we consider data is the word big data, and several other words come into our minds. But what does this have to do with culture? In the image that you see, we can see a combination of data and culture. And for those who do not recognize what is this, well, actually, this was part of the MP3 player of the past. This was a disc containing a number of songs. The best of them could handle around 120 minutes of songs. That's about 2 hours of songs. Nothing to do with today's data and culture. But this was actually data, information, and culture, music. We need to understand how this evolved, how this changed, and we need to have in mind and to understand some terms in order to recognize how we can make a combination between culture and data and big data, and how this becomes an opportunity nowadays. Well, it was once nicely said, I don't actually recall who stated this, that culture is all these things that we do in our everyday life, and it's not part of our obligation. It's not something that we have to do. So in general, it doesn't have to do only with arts, crafts, or creations, or creativity. It has to do with our behavior. And in parallel, culture is our past, how we are formed as characters, how we choose to live, how we choose to interact with others. And this is the culture of everyday life, and it exists. It exists on site, it exists offline to our everyday activities, work, and interactions. It also exists online. But in parallel, we need to think of our hybrid life. How is it created? We actually spend more than 2.5 hours daily on the internet and mainly in social media. And you know something? We are able to interact with anyone, anywhere, all around the world. And you should think that 2 or 3 decades in the past, when something was happening on the other side of Earth, in Tokyo, New York, or even not so far, even closer, in Paris, Madrid, London, Milan, it was expected to arrive in our place and affect our way of living in some weeks, some months, or maybe years after. What happens today with the evolution of technology and the interconnection that we achieve with the internet is that we're able to learn, we're able to acquire knowledge, we're able to assimilate behaviors, interact, be actually digitally present with anything that exists anywhere on Earth at almost zero time. A trend in California today could easily become a trend in Athens or any other place in the world in just a few minutes or just a few hours. And guess what? Guess what a trend is? It is part of our culture. We live in a hybrid mixed culture environment where social media have actually led us to a weird type of flat, united culture. Some could claim that this is not really bad, but it becomes bad when it defines our everyday culture because it changes constantly and does not leave any marks or character definition and lead us to forget our roots, forget what we already talked about. We forget what we are made of. We can divide these cultural stimuli into 2 different axes. The one is the horizontal axis that contains what happens right now in our lives, or let's say what happens daily in our lives and everywhere around the world that affects us. And in this mixed environment, what happens in our lives is defined by the mixed world, is defined by the hybrid world, technology, the internet, social media, real-time communication, our job, information sources, everything. Part of that for the younger, of course, is the school and their family and their friends. And for the older ones is, for example, their work environment or their home, their family, etc. The other axis, the important one for its person is the vertical axis. We all have cultural stimuli coming from our past that somewhat define what we are today. We all have cultural stimuli of that type. Customs, traditions, and are usually the facts that define our daily culture. All the aforementioned together define more or less the way we express ourselves on a daily basis. They define what is called the everyday culture. And culture is not something that we can see, touch, or feel. Intangible cultural heritage is equally important and is defined by our acts on the horizontal and vertical axis. Moreover, there is also a definition for digital intangible cultural heritage that refers to every digital aspect of culture. Example, pictures or photos of a 3D model of a statue, all these that are present on the online environment, on the digital environment, are part of the digital intangible cultural heritage. So what is here the connection with the big data and the market? At the end of the day, what's the connection with the cultural spaces, the niche markets, and our future? Well, all of these things that are considered extremely important aspects of culture may possibly come up in front of us, the internet, at any time. Isn't that nice? Well, actually, an image of the Parthenon, a picture of the Eiffel Tower, a 3D model of an ancient civilization are cultural objects of very, very high importance and should be treated in this way when someone faces them. And today, people can see them while browsing, searching, chatting, or whatever they do in the online world. What's the point in all these? Well, when a museologist, an archaeologist, an historian try to present an object, they try to explain parts of history, they are performing a very, very tedious work. Their work does not include plain presentation of the objects or generally the culture. They intend to create feelings to the audience and visitors. They try to tell stories in which people can find themselves inside or find their ancestors. They try to create reflection. This is the point when it comes to the combination of big data and culture. Culture by itself does not contain so much data if somebody faces culture isolated, either in the online or the offline world. But when cultural objects become parts of an event or they're placed into a museum, then they have a specific meaning, a specific message is trying to create reflections to people. So that's the point when it comes to the combination of data and the culture. And when this part of culture becomes part of the online world and the social media, that's when big data come up. But the internet has a flat culture and it leads people to face cultural objects of high importance detached from all the accompanying information. And that does not create, let's say, the feelings or the reflections or the meaning that the cultural object has. So all the magic is somewhat lost. In this case, we need to understand what culture is. So we already mentioned that. So we need to understand everyday culture and we need to realize what cultural organizations are trying to do. Cultural organizations are very, very active. And we should be very happy that we have cultural organizations in Greece that are very attached to technology. We can see technology into museums, into cultural organizations. We can see extraordinary things in our museums and cultural spaces. But what happens on the internet? What do they do with the internet? Do they have the same presence or something different? It is important to realize that everyone around the world is on the internet, and we need to understand that we are in a mixed environment, a mixed hybrid environment, a hybrid world where people tend to spend their free time rather online than offline. And in this case, we should also consider something different. It's not very easy for all the people around the globe to visit a specific place or a museum or a cultural related space. So as long as technology evolves and we are able to bring technology, to bring culture with technology in every house to everyone around the world, we are obliged to do it. Furthermore, it is pretty clear that by using technologies like the internet, cultural organizations are expanding their values. They are able to spread their message all over the world. And the best place to perform these actions is not just the internet, it's the social media. When we discussed about trends that start in some place in the world and are adopted by other places, almost instantly we should think of how we treat people and culture from the perspective of cultural organizations. This is the exact place where we can think as a big opportunity and niche market where we should focus in the next years if we want to achieve very high results in both the horizontal and vertical axes concerning culture. In this specific scenario, we have to think how technology evolved. Technology evolved firstly by the thirst of people related to technology to create bigger and greater things in order to solve daily problems. And on the other hand, by the demand of those using the technology for better application, or at least for their artificial demand that was generated by the people related to technology. Both of them, however they are created, are the means for technology evolution. And in this case, we have to focus on technology and culture and the social media. That's the mixture of big data and culture. What happens today in cultural spaces all around the world, and basically big cultural organizations, is that they follow the wave related to open data. This wave started, let's say, a decade ago, and they tried to open freely all their information and data about cultural objects to people all over the world. What was the main idea behind this openness, this data openness? The main idea is that culture should concern everybody, and everybody should have, let's say, some kind of free access to information. Even if this information is detached from the metadata, all these accompanying data that make the magic, everybody should be able to face a cultural related object. And not just face the object, but also be able to learn at least some minimal information about the specific object. Several cultural organizations have their cultural objects online on their websites. Several of them have repositories online of free information, not only for people who would like to visit, but also for researchers who would like to perform data analysis actions on these data. But this is not the only important thing. We have to think before people act in social media, and this is not only related to cultural organizations, but with anyone that wants to achieve innovation in their actions. Let's start with the presence of cultural organizations on the internet. People tend to think that online presence via a website is trivial. So cultural organizations should sure have a website and also be active in social media. Funny fact that people expect cultural organizations not only to be active in social media, but have presence in several of them, not only one. And what do they expect from them on social media? Again, information and frequent updates about events or general posts is trivial. what is really required today is interaction. So let's sum up a little bit. People consider trivial to have a website and, let's say, present all cultural objects on the website. Furthermore, they consider it trivial to be active on social media and have presence by giving information about them and provide frequent updates about events or general posts. Again, this is trivial. And they demand from cultural organizations to have several accounts and be interactive. What's being interactive on social media? Being interactive in social media is not only, let's say, participating in conversations into your page, but also be able to participate in conversations outside your page and outside your region. So, two things are essential for cultural organization. First of all, the first has to do with how they can possibly relate their content to the content that is generated online on a daily basis. This means that they should focus on social media content by performing social media analytics. And why do they need this? They need this because if they are able to perform an analysis on the data that are online and try to inject their message into topics that are, for example, trending, then they are providing important messages and informations to people all around the world. So by trying to find these channels that they can possibly attach their message to other trending messages on the internet, cultural organizations can maximize their message spread over the world. The second important thing is that many cultural organizations have tried to become active on social media and they actually managed. What we have seen until now is the importance of data in culture and cultural organizations and how people that live in a hybrid environment, a hybrid world, are related to cultural content. We have said that the relation to cultural content needs to be defined not only by the object itself or an image of the object, but also have some meta information, which is the information that will generate feelings, provide information about the past, and generate reflexes into people so that they will gain some information from the cultural objects and define culture for their own. This is what a museum or a cultural organization has as a scope. And on the other hand, we have the social media that work in a manner that they promote a flat monoculture throughout the web. So the market is actually the combination of these two. So on the one hand, a cultural organization needs, let's say, needs to define some new job opportunities. These job opportunities have to do with the internet marketing, or at least the sharing of information and interacting on the web. This is the one part of this new market that is generated. The other part that is generated is a little bit more technical and deals with big data analysis in favor of the content of cultural organizations. These two new markets and these two new opportunities will be present in the upcoming years, because we are living in this hybrid environment. So people will tend more to search for cultural information through the internet, while in parallel, cultural organizations will try to find alternative channels in order to promote their messages. Some examples from the past have proved that when a museum goes online and let's say shares as much information as possible online, even freely, then at the end of the day, it actually gains a lot more people on site. British Museum was one of the first that had an online presence, and at the end of the day, they found out that almost 1/3 of the people visiting the museum were online visitors. Well, in parallel, that there was a 30% increase in people visiting the museum on site. This means that the experiment of providing any kind of information about cultural related objects online does not finally end to decrease in on-site visits. But in contrary, museums that tend to have a modern online presence actually create new opportunities for markets. I totally believe that the combination of big data and culture does not only have to do with museums, or does not only have to do with cultural organizations. Culture is everywhere on social media, on how we interact, on how we express ourselves. And big data analytics will not be only useful for museums and cultural organizations, but also for humanities. So opportunities when analyzing big data will not come only to data analysis and new and clever algorithms, but also we should define the best context in which big data analytics should be done in order to maximize the efficiency of the result that we receive from this algorithmic approach. Thank you so much.